I'm here today with Lamar Hardwick, one of the contributors to How to Heal Our Divides, An Abundance of Opportunities, which is the second in our How to Heal Our Divides series. Lamar is a father, husband, author, and lead pastor of Tri-Cities Church in Atlanta, Georgia. He's the author of Epic Church, I Am Strong, The Life and Journey of an Autistic Pastor, and a third book, Disability in the Church, A Vision for Diversity and Inclusion. And you can learn more about Lamar and all that he does at autismpastor.com. So Lamar, thanks so much for joining us again. It's wonderful to collaborate as we've had a chance to before. And congratulations on all your continued great work.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, no, it's always great to catch up with you. And I'm glad you're doing well.
Yeah.
But before we kind of get into your chapter and everything with the new book, maybe you can tell folks more about your background.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Like you said, I'm a pastor. I've actually been in pastoral ministry probably now 22, 23 years. So I started really young when I was 20. And so I've been doing that, and that's been in different capacities, from being a youth pastor to associate pastor. And then the last, I say 14, 15 years, I've been the lead pastor of two different churches. And so that's been a journey. Also, most people who know me online know me as an autism pastor. And that's because I was myself diagnosed on the autism spectrum. As an adult, I was 36 years old when I was diagnosed. And that comes after just years of struggling with a lot of things that I didn't quite understand. And I hit what I called a proverbial wall. And then finally tried to get some help to figure out some things that I didn't have answers for. And so that happened in 2014. So since then, large part of my work has been writing about the ways in which the church can become more inclusive of those with not just autism, but other disabilities, whether they're physical, developmental, or intellectual disabilities.
Which, is really important work. And I've been so glad, to see the books that you've come out with and also your continuation, in this area. So why don't you tell folks about your PhD program? Because I know you're in the middle of that with an emphasis in this area.
Yeah, so I did a doctorate of ministry program years ago. And most people know that's more of a practitioner's degree. And so I've really been able to use that to talk about a lot of the application. And so like my book, Disability in the Church, is more of a praxis book. So there's some theology. But I decided to go back and do a PhD because I really wanted to explore ethics, but also further explore the intersection between race, disability, and religion, particularly in Western Christianity. And so, I'm in my third or fourth semester, I don't know, it's starting to run together of this program. But I also chose the school that I am attending because they have a MLK Legacies specialization. And so I'm able to also further conflate my work on race, religion, and disability with the legacy of Dr. King's work, particularly in civil rights, and sort of see how the disability rights movement really got its engine and its ethos from the civil rights movement, which was largely led by the historically Black church. And so this has just been an interesting combination of exploring all those things and using some of his work to explore ways to further disability inclusion, not just in the church, but in the broader society.
Which, as I mentioned before, I think it's just such an important area, and I'm so glad that you're doing work on this. And I hope that there'll be a book that comes out of this at some point in time.
Yeah, so I'm really processing that, but then also, in addition to contributing a chapter to the book we're talking about today, I'm actually in talks with my agent about producing another book. So I was a little bit leery about trying to write a book while I was doing the PhD program.
Sure.
but there's been a lot of things that have come up, and a lot of publishers have been interested in me writing more about the intersection of disability and race. And so there'll be a book in between the time that I graduate, and then probably after I finish, I'll do a little bit more work that'll be specifically on what I learn about Dr. King's work and the ways that, so sort of, I'm trying to sort of build on it if it makes sense. So I did disability in the church. I talked a little bit about race in that book. The next book will talk a little bit more about race. And then when I'm done, I'll talk about MLK and his legacy and impact on how we can further inclusion for disability in
Wow, good for
society.
you.
Yeah.
Good for you. Important work. So the chapter in the book, How to Heal Our Divides book, is
Mhm.
called We Need New Shoes, How Disability Discrimination Has Historically Divided Our Nation. Can you tell people what you mean when you say we need new shoes?
Yeah, so it's just it's kind of a combination. A lot of people who know me know that I am a sneakerhead. And so I always post new shoes that I buy, collect shoes. But also it's a play on Paul's words in the book of Galatians, where he talks about the fact that he's asking the church to put themselves in his shoes. And so it, in that letter, we learned a little bit about Paul and disability that he had. He makes mention of the fact that some of the people in the province of Galatia treated him so well that they would have given him their eyes if they could, which was a way to reference the fact that Paul was going blind, or may have at that point started to realize it. He actually says that that's what stopped him from traveling. So he ended up in Galatia on accident because he had vision problems. But he challenges them to put themselves in his shoes. And so I use that play on word to say that that was one of Paul's way of saying that, for people with disabilities, we live in a world that is also not built for us. And so we're constantly having to adjust to things that don't often consider us. And so to say that we need new shoes is to swap shoes, is to, as the old colloquialism says, to walk a mile in my shoes or walk a mile in the shoes of a person with a disability, switch places, and then understand that persons with disabilities have long had to navigate a world that never considered them. What would it be like for persons who are able-bodied to put on the shoes of persons with disabilities, to see life from their perspective, to see faith from their perspective, to see the church from their perspective, and how helpful that would be in furthering inclusion. But also to help us to understand that in our country, a large part of the tensions that we've had racially has stemmed from the faith community, originally going back to the 1600s, using disability as a way of categorizing groups of people, and particularly racially, and looking at the impact that also has on helping us heal our divides racially. So we kind of have to go back to how disability was used to say that enslaved Africans were inferior, that they were disabled, and that they needed white supervision, right? So I think those two things go hand in hand. And I firmly believe that until we go back and really deal with some of the ableist history of our country, we're not really equipped to deal with the other parts of things that divide us, including race.
Yeah. That was why, I was so thrilled about your book and so glad, you contributed to this book, because I knew that, you're working
Mhm.
on that intersection that doesn't get covered much that I've seen.
Right,
And
right.
so, between that and your PhD work and everything else you're doing to raise awareness about it, I think it's just really valuable for people to
Mhm.
learn. I mean, there's just so much stuff about our history that was swept under the rug, right?
Yeah.
And we're only now, at least speaking for myself, learning a lot of things over the last few years that I was
Mhm.
never told before. And,
Yeah.
it's just really an opportunity for us to all learn a lot and, reflect a lot. And, hopefully it'll all lead to helping to heal some of these deep chasmic divides that we've got, which, reality I know is that, it's never going to be healed completely. I
Mhm.
can't imagine, but we've got to do our best to
Exactly.
make it minimized as best we possibly
Right.
can. So, I
Yeah.
just really appreciate your efforts to help do that. Um, so what would you say is like the number one thing that you'd like people to take away from your chapter?
I think, I'd spend the majority of the chapter kind of painting the picture of what Paul was talking about and the reason why it's important to look at healing our divides from the perspective of a change of shoes, a change of perspective. And then towards the end, what I really want people to come away with is that we have to come to the reality and face the reality rather that a large part of the reason why we have a lack of disability inclusion, which I also just stated that it also intersects with race, is because the way in which our society has been constructed, it intentionally left out the voices of those who are disabled. And so it's no wonder why we have so many problems trying to include disabled people. Every social construct that we have in our country was constructed in ways that intentionally excluded them. And so what I want people to go away with is, and the whole thing about changing shoes is, the only way to course correct that is to bring disabled people to the table and give them platforms and roles, real leadership roles, to help shape the way that the future of our society looks, because their voices were excluded. So the only way to undo that is to have a heavy emphasis on really gleaning the knowledge and the wisdom and the wealth of experience that they've had navigating this world and this country, and even navigating Christianity as those who have been historically excluded. So, towards the end, I just talk about we need more leaders, and not just to talk about disability. Certainly that's important, but persons with disabilities navigate the world in ways that are profoundly different from able-bodied people. And there's a wealth of wisdom in all things because of their experiences that will just help reshape the world and help heal our divides. But we got to make it a priority to put them in positions of real leadership and influence so that we continue to make the same mistakes and make inclusion much more difficult for them. So we need them at the table. We need them to be part of the leadership structure moving forward.
Amen. Amen. So looking forward, I know we've already talked about this a little bit. You'll be finishing your PhD program. It sounds like there's at least 2 books that you've already got, conceptualized. So that's awfully
Mhm.
wonderful to hear. Anything else that you want to talk about in terms of looking forward?
Yeah, just looking forward to doing a lot of what I was unable to do primarily because of COVID. And then there may be some that know that I actually, for about a year, was battling stage 3 cancer. So I'm happy to report I'm cancer free.
Yay.
Um,
Amen.
but I share that to say that I really didn't have a lot of time to really get out and talk a lot about my current book. And so I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to do that now that, things have kind of cleared up and I'm done with treatment and doing better. So, people can find me out and about. I just did a conference in San Diego earlier in the year. In January, I did one in Dallas. And so I'm just looking forward to getting out there, meeting with other people, having these discussions, and using even those interactions with other people and other scholars in this field to continue to help sharpen what I'm trying to bring to the table, and hopefully just continue to make an impact in, especially in the church, and helping the church understand how important it is that we talk about these, because disability and race tend to be compartmentalized. Um, but I think that that's something that we have to rectify, that those two things are very much linked. And the church has a tremendous amount of influence on how society has viewed those things historically. So the good news is, while we haven't always done it the right way, the good news is we still have influence on helping to recalibrate and see it in a way that's much more representative of what I think Jesus taught us to do. So I'm looking forward to that.
Good.
And, and other projects, a newsletter that I'm starting up, and a couple of other side projects that I'm trying to get off the ground while while still trying to pass or do a PhD. So we'll see how that goes.
You're a busy, productive guy, which is awesome to see.
Yeah.
So just so that I can let people know, the newest book that you referred to is the one I mentioned earlier, Disability in the Church, right?
Right.
A Vision for Diversity and Inclusion. So that's the one that's Lamar's current, most recent book. And so, yeah, I mean, I would encourage folks to seek him out to come and talk about that and about his work. And, as I mentioned before, you can learn more about Lamar and everything he's doing at autismpastor.com. And of course, you can learn about the entire How to Heal Our Divides effort at howtohealourdivides.com. So Lamar, thanks so much for your contribution to this effort and for all the work that you're doing.
Well, thanks for having me. It was an absolute pleasure to be able to contribute to the book. And so I'm looking forward to its release.
Well, I love being able to collaborate with you and look for additional ways to do that in the future. So let's
Absolutely.
keep an eye out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks again.